I'm about to make the entire Star Wars fan base very angry. You might recall that several videos ago I made a video about a failed video attempt in which I tried to talk about the entire series of Star Wars films while driving around running errands, and that just somehow didn't work out for me. So this is now my second attempt to talk about the whole series of Star Wars movies. Now, the first thing you should be aware of is that I almost never watch movies. I tend to dislike film as a storytelling medium due to the limitations of a 90-minute runtime that, in comparison to a novel, gives very little time for character development and thus forces the film to make each character more of a caricature that has its own shtick right from the outset, so that the viewer immediately knows where the character stands within a story that doesn't have time for nuance, and so ends up following the tired old Hollywood plot lines. Of course, there are also movies that don't worry much about plot or characters and simply attempt to dazzle and entertain the viewers with action and adventure and amazing visuals. But I don't enjoy those ones either because I dislike both action films and horror films. You see, I'm coming from a place where for over 15 years I worked as a paramedic in the highest gang-populated neighborhoods of North America's fourth most populous city. So when I sit down and watch a scripted, fictionalized action sequence, it doesn't even give me the slightest adrenaline bump. And I've always said that if I wanted to see horror or blood and guts, I would just go to work. I actually heard a great quote from an ex-convict recently who said, "The people who glorify violence have never been part of it." And I think that holds so true a lot of the time. Plus, we live in this world where you can watch literally anything anytime you want. You can turn on YouTube or Live Leaks or who knows what else and watch real life fights, real life car chases, even real life gunfights, and really any level of violence and death that you happen to want to see. So again, I just don't see the appeal of scripted, made up stuff. But having said all that, I did end up watching through the entire series of Star Wars films, and the reason I did so was to watch them with my kids. The only other movies I can recall watching in the past couple of years are the first several Harry Potter films, and that was for the same reason, because I'm reading through the series with my 9-year-old boy, and we've been working through the films as we go. But for now, I'm going to talk about the Star Wars movies, and when anybody talks about their opinions about film or any other media, context is vital. For me to express my opinions about media or art without providing context would be pretty much a meaningless experience for you as a viewer. So here's what I personally look for during the very occasional times when I do watch a movie. First of all, I love fantasy settings because the more far removed from real life it is, the more it can take me out of this world and take me to a whole new world. And the more visually interesting that world is to see on screen, the happier I am, the more I can enjoy that form of escapism from real life and everything that goes along with real life. And of course, sci-fi is basically future fantasy, which is why you have space armor that apparently is basically functionally useless, and sword duels with lightsabers and all that stuff. So the whole science fiction theme, although I tend to enjoy it less than fantasy, is still kind of in the same fantasy realm. And if I can't have a setting like that that's far removed from the normal world, I do like a film to be quirky and interesting and different. Something that's a little off of the beaten path with unique characters and that doesn't just follow the same old movie tropes. I also enjoy smart dialogue. It doesn't have to be Gilmore Girls level, but at least I need something that keeps me engaged with good writing. To give an example, for years now, whenever I've been asked to state my favorite movie, and I'm not a great person to ask that of because I watch so few of them, but I've always stated Snatch is my favorite movie because it has fascinating characters, snappy dialogue, a web of interconnected plot lines, and even the direction of the film, the cuts, and the whole visual package are all very stylized and set it apart from other movies. So before I go on and talk about the Star Wars films, having said all that, I would love to hear from you any movies you would recommend based on what I've just told you about what I enjoy in movies, because I do really enjoy the experience of sitting down to watch a movie if it's something that is interesting and smart and visually something that captures me. So let me know in the comments if you have recommendations. Now, a couple of things that perhaps predispose me for enjoying the Star Wars films are, as I discussed, the sci-fi space epic setting, and the fact that I was alive when the first one hit the theaters, though I was far too young to actually go see it. But I did watch and enjoy the original trilogy at least once as a child, and then at least once more in my later teens. So the nostalgia factor should be there for me, given the fact that throughout my life there have been times when I watched through that original trilogy. As far as the current body of films go, we watched through the series in chronological order of the events of the movies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very briefly mention my thoughts on each of the films in the order in which we watched them. Obviously, we started with episodes 1 to 3, and I guess there are plenty of people who enjoy them well enough, and I don't want to poop on their parade. So the less I say about episodes 1 to 3, the better. The best thing I can say about those 3 movies is that I never have to watch them again. Next up was Rogue One, which I found to be interesting and a different change of pace, but the fact that I barely remember any of the movie already, even though it's been such a short period of time since I watched it, it shows that it mustn't have thrilled me all that much, though, mind you, this isn't saying too much, as my memory for this stuff is actually terrible. Back when I did watch movies more regularly, there were at least 1 or 2 occasions when I'd rent a movie from the local video store. I would start watching it, and then partway into it realize, wait, I've already seen this movie. So yeah, the memory's never been great with that stuff. In any case, the characters in Rogue One seemed to have more life to them than the very flat characters of episodes 1 to 3. Next up was the original trilogy with episodes 4 to 6. And as much as I did enjoy the original trilogy when I was younger, I have to say that I simply don't enjoy them anymore. While the whole Star Wars universe and many of its inhabitants are visually amazing to see on screen, I found the main characters of that original trilogy to be bland, the dialogue to be downright terrible despite Carrie Fisher's best efforts at the time, and the plot to be very heavily reliant on the sort of pew-pew action that bores the hell out of me. The one really interesting character actually from that series is Lord Darth Vader. That guy's a complicated fellow, and it made for an interesting character. So The Force Awakens was up next, and that movie felt like it was starting off in an intriguingly unique fashion, but it quickly fell into a carbon copy of the old good team has to destroy the big deadly spaceship, and meanwhile my relative has become a leader on the evil team and I have to confront and conflict with them plot that we're already so familiar with from the original trilogy. I actually couldn't believe that the writers would be so lazy as to recycle that old storyline, but I'm sure I'm missing something somewhere in there. However, at least the characters felt more vibrant again in that one. And then last up, the most recent one we watched was The Last Jedi. Now, this is going to really be the last straw for all you diehard Star Wars nerds, because this is actually the one movie that I really enjoyed. I was like, finally, they've done it right. With compelling characters, snappy dialogue, a plot that turned some of the old Star Wars tropes on their heads, such as an evolving and more nuanced perspective of the Force, and perhaps most importantly, it has a very good sense of humor. I also love Finn as a strong, badass, non-whiny lead character. So yeah, this one finally grabbed me enough that I'm actually looking forward to the release of episode 9 now, despite the massive loss of Carrie Fisher, rather than dreading having to continue with the series. So those were my very brief impressions of each of the movies, and my overall negative impression of the series was perhaps the final push I needed to put my Star Wars Rebellion board game on my games to sell pile, though to be honest I was already leaning towards selling it because I get a similar but better experience with War of the Ring, but that's getting into board games, not movies. But again, that's just all one non-expert's opinion on all of that. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the series as a whole. I'm sure a lot of you are big Star Wars fans, and which of those movies was your favorite? I'd be interested to know that too. And also, don't forget to recommend other titles that are good enough for even a non-movie watcher like me to watch. Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind just crushing that like button, smashing that subscribe button, and chucking the link for this video with someone who you think would enjoy it, by golly, I would appreciate that. Cheers. Is this motherfucker actually working? What? I made a video about in the highest gang-populated near... and I've always said, so the less I say about the, yes, even though it's been such a, for all of you die-hard Star Wars. What?